Somewhere in the dark between Mars and Jupiter, there is a single rock worth more than every asset on planet Earth combined. More than every stock market, every bank vault, every ounce of gold ever mined, every dollar, yuan, and euro that has ever changed hands, added together and multiplied many times over. It isn't science fiction. It's a real object, 226 kilometers wide, and NASA has already launched a spacecraft toward it. But here's the catch nobody tells you. The scientist who calculated that number will be the first to tell you it's worthless. Before we get into why, hit subscribe. This channel exists to chase down stories exactly this strange, and you won't want to miss where this one goes. So let's start with the number, because you need to actually feel the size of it. In 2017, a planetary scientist named Lindy Elkins-Tanton, based at Arizona State University, ran a simple calculation. She took the estimated amount of iron and nickel locked inside this asteroid and multiplied it by the price those metals fetch here on Earth. The result didn't look like a price tag anymore. It looked like a typo. Somewhere north of $10,000 quadrillion, a figure so large that economists don't really have a use for it, because nothing in the human economy has ever required a number that big. Try to place that next to something you can actually hold in your head. Every country on Earth, added together, produces somewhere around $100 trillion of goods and services in a year. This asteroid's theoretical worth isn't 10 times that. It isn't 1,000 times that. It's something like 100,000 times the entire annual output of human civilization. Total global debt, the number that triggers bailouts and topples governments, could be wiped out by this rock's value not once, but tens of thousands of times over, with an ocean of wealth left standing afterward. And if you'd rather compare it to Earth itself, the combined worth of every company, every piece of real estate, every mineral resource we've ever pulled out of this planet still doesn't come close. On paper, one 226-kilometer rock outweighs the financial value of the entire world we're standing on. Here's another way to feel the scale of it. Across the entirety of human history, every civilization that has ever dug, panned, or mined for gold has pulled somewhere around $15 trillion worth of it out of the ground. All of it, from ancient Egypt to modern-day South Africa, melted down into one imaginary pile. Psyche's theoretical value isn't twice that pile. It isn't 100 times that pile. It's somewhere close to 1,000,000 times the value of every gram of gold humanity has ever touched, sitting quietly on a single rock nobody had heard of a few years ago. This object has a name. It's called 16 Psyche, and it was first spotted on March 17, 1852, by an Italian astronomer scanning the sky for what were then called minor planets. He named it after the Greek goddess of the soul. For over a century and a half it sat there quietly, just another dim point of light drifting in the asteroid belt, the wide ring of rubble left behind after the planets finished forming. Nobody suspected it was hiding anything unusual. Most objects in that belt are what you'd expect: chunks of rock, sometimes laced with ice, debris that never got the chance to become a planet. Psyche broke that pattern. When astronomers bounced radar off its surface and studied the way light reflected from it, the readings didn't match stone. They matched metal, iron and nickel, the exact same alloy that makes up the center of our own planet. And once scientists ran the numbers on its mass versus its size, they got another shock. This thing is dense. Metal dense. Nothing else in the asteroid belt is supposed to look like this. Rock and ice bodies simply don't post numbers like that. Something about this object's history was fundamentally different from everything orbiting around it. And the strangeness doesn't stop at composition. Psyche is big enough that its gravity actually tugs on other asteroids passing nearby, and that faint pull is one of the main ways scientists have been able to weigh it from millions of kilometers away. Yet stand on its surface yourself, and you'd barely feel any gravity at all. Its pull is roughly 1/100th of what you feel standing right now. A person who weighs 80 kilograms on Earth would weigh less than a single kilogram there, light enough to push off the ground and drift for minutes before settling back down. And the whole object spins fast. A full rotation takes only about 4 hours, which means a day and a night on Psyche flicker past roughly 6 times for every single day that passes here on Earth. It's a world that is massive enough to bend the paths of its neighbors, yet so light on its own surface that gravity almost stops meaning anything at all. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. The leading theory, and it's one of the boldest ideas in modern planetary science, is that Psyche isn't an asteroid at all. It's the exposed heart of a planet that never got to finish growing up. Picture the solar system 4.5 billion years ago, a chaotic construction site of colliding rock, where young planetary bodies were forming, and inside each one, gravity was sorting the material by weight. The heavy stuff, iron and nickel, sank toward the center and formed a molten core, exactly the way it did inside our own Earth. The lighter rock floated up and hardened into a mantle and a crust around it. But not every one of those baby planets survived what came next. According to this theory, one of them took hit after catastrophic hit from other forming bodies, blow after blow, until its entire outer shell, the rock, the crust, everything that wasn't core, was blasted away into space, leaving nothing behind but the naked metal center. No skin, no shell, just a heart, still orbiting the sun, alone, for 4.5 billion years. If that's true, then what NASA is actually chasing isn't a rock. It's a corpse, the leftover core of a planet that died before it ever finished being born. And that single idea is the real reason this mission exists. Not the money, the science. Because our own planet has a core just like the one Psyche might be. Roughly 2,900 kilometers beneath your feet right now. There's a sphere of iron and nickel running somewhere around 5,000 degrees Celsius. And it's not just sitting there. It's generating the magnetic field that protects every living thing on this planet from the worst of what the sun throws at us. And we will never touch it. We will never even get close. The deepest hole humans have ever drilled into the Earth is the Kola Superdeep Borehole in Russia, a project that consumed roughly 2 decades of engineering and reached a little over 12 kilometers down before the rock and heat finally stopped the drill. 12 kilometers against a core that starts nearly 3,000 kilometers down. We have barely broken the surface of our own world. Psyche, floating out past Mars, may be offering us something we can never dig for at home. A planetary core sitting wide open in sunlight, ready to be studied directly. Now here's the twist in the story. The part Elkins-Tanton herself is upfront about. That staggering price tag she calculated isn't just impractical. It's meaningless, for 2 separate reasons. And the second one is the more interesting of the two. The first reason is obvious enough. There is no rocket, no technology, nothing remotely close to existing that could physically haul a 226-kilometer chunk of metal back to Earth. It would stay exactly where it is, no matter what it's theoretically worth. The second reason is the one that should make you rethink what value even means. Imagine, purely hypothetically, that we somehow could bring all that iron and nickel home. The moment we did, the fortune would collapse in on itself. Iron and nickel are expensive on Earth for exactly one reason: scarcity. There's a limited, manageable supply of them, and that scarcity is what sets the price. Flood the market with an asteroid's worth of the stuff. More metal than humanity has mined in its entire history, and the price wouldn't hold. It would crater. The value of the exact thing that made Psyche's number so enormous is the same value that would vanish the instant anyone tried to actually cash it in. It's a fortune that destroys itself the moment you try to spend it. And to put the absurdity in perspective, Psyche isn't even the record holder. There's another metal-rich asteroid called Davida with a theoretical price tag that runs even higher, closer to 3 times Psyche's number. The asteroid belt is quietly littered with rocks that are simultaneously priceless and worthless, depending entirely on whether you're doing math or trying to buy a coffee with one. So if the money was never the point, why is NASA actually going? Because the price of finding out is almost comically small next to what's being chased. The entire Psyche mission, building the spacecraft, launching it, running it for years across the solar system, comes in at a little over $1 billion. Set that beside the $10 quintillion fantasy figure, and NASA is spending something like 1/10 of the asteroid's imaginary worth just to go take a look at it. We're not mining it. We're not claiming it. We're simply trying to understand what it is. Put another way, the entire budget for this mission is smaller than what a single blockbuster movie franchise spends on a handful of films, and with that budget, humanity is reaching out 3.5 billion kilometers to look at something no telescope on Earth could ever properly explain. That is the actual trade being made here. Not treasure for treasure, but a modest, almost ordinary amount of money for a direct answer to one of the oldest questions in planetary science. What does the inside of a world actually look like? The mission was formally selected back in January 2017, and the spacecraft, also named Psyche, launched on October 13, 2023, riding one of the most powerful rockets currently in service. Lifting off from Kennedy Space Center, it doesn't fly the way you'd picture a normal rocket-powered probe. Instead, it uses solar electric propulsion, banks of thrusters that ionize xenon gas and fire it out as a faint blue exhaust. It's not dramatic. It's not fast in any short-term sense. But over months and years, that quiet, continuous push builds up enormous velocity, all without carrying tons of conventional fuel. The full journey stretches across roughly 3.5 billion kilometers, and it will take about 6 years from launch to arrival. On board, the spacecraft carries a set of instruments built specifically to answer the question of what Psyche actually is. There are multispectral cameras to map its surface in detail, a gamma ray and neutron spectrometer to work out its chemical makeup, and the instrument scientists are most excited about, a magnetometer. The logic behind it is elegant. If Psyche really is the leftover core of a planet, it may still be carrying a fossilized version of that planet's ancient magnetic field, frozen into the metal from the moment it solidified billions of years ago. A block of ordinary rock can't hold a signature like that. Only a genuine metal core can. So, if that magnetometer picks up a trace of ancient magnetism buried in Psyche, it's about as close to a fingerprint of a lost planet as we could ever hope to find. The mission has already passed one major milestone. On May 15, 2026, the spacecraft swept past Mars, coming within about 4,600 kilometers of the planet's surface, not to study it, but to steal from it. Using Mars's gravity, the spacecraft picked up a critical boost in speed and bent its trajectory onto the exact path needed to reach the asteroid belt, all without burning a single extra drop of fuel. Mission engineers used the close pass as a dress rehearsal too, testing the science instruments against a real planetary target. The results came back better than expected. The magnetometer even caught a clear signature of Mars's own magnetic bow shock, the place where the solar wind slams into the planet's magnetic field, proving the instrument works exactly as designed under real conditions. The spacecraft is now locked on to its final course, aimed at an arrival window in the summer of 2029. But here's where the story gets even more unresolved, and honestly, more interesting. Even before this mission launched, scientists studying Psyche from a distance ran into a problem. When they calculated its mass against its size, the density that came back was too low. A solid ball of iron and nickel that size should weigh dramatically more than what they were measuring. Psyche, it turns out, probably isn't pure metal at all. Current estimates suggest it might only be a third to half metal by volume, riddled with gaps, fractures, and a surprising amount of rock mixed in. And in 2024, observations using the James Webb Space Telescope added another layer to the mystery. Researchers detected signs of hydroxyl, a hydrogen-oxygen molecule tied to water chemistry, on Psyche's surface. Water chemistry, on an object that was supposed to be a dry, naked metal core. Nobody predicted that. Nobody fully understands it yet. Hydroxyl doesn't just appear on a bare metal surface for no reason. Either the asteroid has been chemically altered by impacts from icy bodies over billions of years, or Psyche is carrying a piece of its history that nobody accounted for when the mission was first designed. Either way, the picture scientists had of a simple gleaming metal sphere is already falling apart before the spacecraft has even arrived. And that is exactly the kind of contradiction that makes a mission like this worth flying in the first place. So maybe Psyche isn't the clean, gleaming iron heart of a dead planet that scientists originally imagined. Maybe it's something messier, a shattered, rubble-strewn mixture of metal and stone with a history far stranger than a single catastrophic stripping event. Elkins-Tanton has said plainly more than once that nobody actually knows what Psyche is yet, and that she fully expects to be surprised when the spacecraft finally gets there. That's not a weakness in the mission plan. It's the entire reason the mission exists in the first place. You don't spend 6 years and $1 billion crossing the solar system to confirm something you already understand. You do it because there's a 200-kilometer object out there that refuses to fit any of the categories we've built for it, and the only way to find out what it actually is to go and look. When the spacecraft finally arrives in the summer of 2029, it won't just fly past. It will settle into orbit around Psyche and stay there for roughly 26 months, spiraling gradually closer, mapping every crater, ridge, and fracture on a world that might be made of exposed planetary heart. For the first time in human history, we'll get a direct look at what may be the surviving core of a planet that died before Earth had even finished forming. And that, in the end, is the real catch behind the headline. $10 quintillion was never a real price. It was a hook, a number so absurd it made the entire planet stop and pay attention to a rock most people had never heard of. But underneath that fake fortune was something worth infinitely more than money. A chance to look directly at the thing buried at the center of every rocky world, including the one currently keeping you alive, spinning silently under your own feet. 3,000 kilometers down, and utterly out of reach, we built a magnetic shield around ourselves out of something we will never be able to touch. And in 3 years, if everything goes right, a small spacecraft powered by a faint blue glow is going to show us, for the very first time, what that hidden heart actually looks like. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in all of this. We spent years chasing a headline about $10 quintillion, when the actual prize was never something you could spend at all. It was understanding. It was the chance to answer a question that has sat unanswered since the first person looked down at the ground beneath them and wondered what was actually underneath it. Somewhere out past Mars, a dead planet's heart is still turning in the dark, waiting for us to finally arrive and ask it what happened. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.